Welcome back to another Centennial Tidbit where we're talking with people about their involvement with the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and the Centennial this year. And today we get the opportunity to talk with Philip Bigler, who is an author of 10 different books. He's a former Arlington National Cemetery historian, as well as the 1998 Teacher of the Year. So welcome, Philip.
Well, thanks, Kevin. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Can you tell us when you first became one of the historians at Arlington National Cemetery?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I decided to take a break from teaching in 1982. And so I went back to graduate school. And then in 1983, I applied through the civil service system. And lo and behold, there was a job opening for the historian at Arlington National Cemetery, actually one of three historians. And so I applied through the civil service. And sure enough, I was able to get the job. I came to work there in October of 1983. And I stayed there for 2 years. And then I went back to teaching. And again, it's one of the greatest jobs I've ever had. It was just an absolutely fascinating place to be.
Well, I can imagine with Arlington being, I know as a tomb guard when I was down there, I found the history just absolutely amazing, that you could walk through the cemetery and see the development of our nation buried there and the people that influenced it, whether it was, from the most common of individual to the highest ranking, and presidents of the United States. So,
well, it's interesting because I've had a long history with Arlington. Actually, I got married in the cemetery, believe it or not, in 1982, because a friend of mine worked at Arlington House and offered that for a place to get married. It has a beautiful vista of Washington, D.C. And now both my parents and in-laws are buried there. And on the back of my dad's tomb, he's buried in 7A, just below the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. There's an inscription from my book, In Honor Glory, and it says, each headstone represents a story waiting to be told, a past to be remembered. And that's really what you go to Arlington for, is to relive history and to learn from the stories of everybody there.
Oh, well said. So can you tell us some of the things that you remember from your time as a historian in Arlington?
Well, it was an incredible thing. You walk into Arlington, our office was right next to the Tomb Guard quarters at the amphitheater. So it was a beautiful place to work. But the first thing that happened after I started working there was the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, Lebanon. And that took place in October 23rd, 1983. And we lost 241 American servicemen. And over the next 2 weeks, Arlington buried 21 of those young Marines. And so for the first time, I really got the sense that, when you read a headline in the news, this is actually real, and these are real people, and these are real people who sacrificed for our country. So that was really a stunning moment for me to get that realization. It was also, interestingly enough, it was the 40th anniversary of the end of World War II. And so those 2 years I was there, from 83 to 85, we had all sorts of veteran groups coming to Arlington. World War II veterans, Battle of the Bulge veterans. We had Navajo code talkers, the Tuskegee Airmen. And so every day it was just an amazing experience, because we got to meet all of these people who had lived history and basically had saved the world from fascism. But one of the things that really struck me was on January 20th, 1985, it was the second inaugural of President Reagan, and it was a brutally, brutally cold week we had in Washington. So they had canceled all the inaugural events, and it was so cold that we had very few visitors up at the tomb. But I walked upstairs from our office, and I saw these two men standing in the trophy room, and they were looking out the window watching the lone sentinel maintaining his vigil. And I noticed that both of them had Medal of Honors around their necks. And so I went up and introduced myself, and one man said his name was Red Irwin, and the other was a guy by the name of Desmond Doss. So I took them down to the quarters, the tomb quarters, and introduced them to the tomb guard, who of course were thrilled to meet these wonderful veterans. And then I looked up their Medal of Honor citations, and it turned out that Red Irwin, who's obviously had been very badly burned, he was a radio operator on a B-29 Superfortress. And they were flying missions over Japan in 1945. And one of his jobs was to drop phosphorus smoke flares out the cockpit, out of the plane, to mark bombing patterns. And during this run, one of those flares kicked back into the fuselage of the plane. phosphorus burns at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And Red picked up that flare and walked the entire length of the fuselage of the plane, because it was going down, it was filling full of smoke, and threw it out the window of the pilot. The plane pulled out of a crash dive at 300 feet, and the plane was able to survive. They had to fly all the way back to Iwo Jima, and Red was so badly burned, they didn't think he was going to survive, but he eventually did and won the Medal of Honor. The other, Desmond Doss, was the only conscientious objector to win the Medal of Honor. And of course, he's now known because of the Clint Eastwood movie Hacksaw Ridge. But Desmond Doss, again, was a conscientious objector. He said he would never carry a gun. So he served as a medic. And during the Battle of Okinawa, he's credited with saving anywhere from 50 to 100 American soldiers, having been wounded 4 times, having eventually would lose a lung and 4 ribs because of his injuries. And I mean, this was really one of those humbling experiences to see, again, real history, real heroes in our country, and all coming to Arlington, all coming to the tomb to pay their respects to the unknown.
That's amazing. I know that when I was down there from 1997 to 98, so I was there during the disinterment of the Vietnam Unknown Soldier. This was probably back before we had Google and cell phones and internet per se. We still did things the old-fashioned way. And I've got my tattered and torn book of In Honored Glory that you wrote. This was our go-to book when it came to tomb guards and training. I mean, if I wanted to know anything about the cemetery in one resource, this was the book that we all went out and got. So, thank you for this.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you, what made you write this book?
Well, it was interesting, Gavin. After I went back to teaching in 1985, I said, I really know a lot about the cemetery, and there really isn't a history of Arlington out there. The last one had been written, was more of a picture book, written by a guy named Colonel Hinkle, who wrote a book called Monuments to Heroes. And so I said, I really could write the history of the cemetery. So that became my first book. And so in 1986, I sat down and put together what I considered at that time a pretty comprehensive history of the cemetery. It's gone through, it's amazing. It's gone through 4 printings or 4 editions rather, and 23 printings, still in print at Arlington. Again, this was all before, as you say, before Google and all these other kind of things. So it was a real labor of love, and I was very proud of that book, and still am. The photograph, interestingly enough, was taken at night. In the sergeant there is Ken Gordon. And we did a wonderful picture at night of the tomb, and it was really a work of love, and it's still, I'm very proud of that book, and it does tell, I think, the history of Arlington really up to the 21st century.
No, it was fantastic. For someone who's a kind of a geek when it comes to history, learning about everything was certainly nice, and then having the opportunity to actually walk it and be there, like you said, you get. It's one thing to read it in a book. It's the second thing to actually be standing there and take it all in. So I truly appreciate it. I know the guys still do, which kind of leads me into my next question, is that you came up with a new book. And it's called Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, A Century of Honor. Tell me about that.
It's kind of interesting. I was talking to Kevin Donovan, who was a former tomb guard, and Kevin's a good friend. We used to go to hockey games together back in the 80s. And we were talking about the forthcoming 100th anniversary of the tomb. And I really thought it'd be interesting to really write a comprehensive history of the tomb and place it into the context of the history of America. Why we had a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, what was going on during that, what the tomb's symbolism was going to be, and actually to go back and look at the original records. I went to the National Archives, and I went to also to the Eisenhower Library, the Library of Congress, the Council for the Fine Arts, all these different places, and actually the Ford Library as well, and to do research. And I was looking at documents. Some of them had not been looked at since 1920, 1921. And I love research. So, to me, it was just a joy to do these kind of things. And so, I decided that I was able to put together, the history of the tomb. and in this context. And one of the things I think one of the things that surprised me the most was how little Americans know about World War One. And of course, we just went through the centennial of the war. And even today, I don't think Americans have that appreciation. And I will be honest, I did not either. Sadly, in 1983, 84, 85, when I was at Arlington, we still had World War One veterans coming to Arlington. And they would go on Veterans Day and place a wreath at the Pershing grave. And they would also place a wreath at the Argonne Cross. But I didn't comprehend the impact of that war in terms of humanity and in terms of American civilization and actually world civilization. And so in many ways, what it made the tomb become more meaningful to me, because what the tomb actually did was to bring meaning to the sacrifice of all those men who died during that war. For Americans, it's 116,000 people, but that's in 7 months of combat. Again, Americans don't realize that. And if you look at what the Europeans and the British and the French and the Germans did and the Russians, their numbers are just staggering. And the number of unknowns was also amazing to me. Again, doing the research, I had no concept about how many people really just disappeared but were buried in graves that were unmarked in that. And so I think I got a better understanding of the tomb. I thought I knew a lot about it, but actually going through the process of research and writing, I learned a lot more. And that's what I really hope came out in this book, again, is how the tomb is significant and meaningful.
Well, I think that it definitely did. And so I want to ask you a question. You've done a tremendous amount of research, and God, I wish I was in your shoes at times, just because I find it truly fascinating when I find a little nugget of information. Going through the centennial process for me as a tomb guard, your book gave me a lot of information, and I thought I knew it all, but I've been diving more and more into our sister services and finding out their participation. And what I truly enjoy is how the experience, whether it was in 1921 or 58 or even 84, had a tremendous impact if a service member was a part of that. And we have seen over the years how monuments, and I know the tomb is not a monument, it's a grave, but the monuments have decreased in their relevancy as the combatants pass on, or even the families pass on. And that doesn't really seem to be the case when it comes to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And so I was curious why you think that the tomb has become so relevant and increased in its relevancy since Hamilton Fish wrote the legislation and it was passed in 1921.
Well, I think first off, it's symbolic to all of the American soldiers who have served in this country, and I think it makes it a universal monument. And people come there in order to learn and pay their respects to the servicemen who served and died in the service of our nation. And actually, I think as they added on the other graves, they added the World War II and the Korean grave in 1958. That again was, there was a great deal of debate about that. Is the tomb finished? Do we need to add more graves? And they finally decided that they wanted to do that to honor the other veterans from those wars. And then they also added the Vietnam one in 1984. And again, I was there for that, which was again an amazing day. But I think that the tomb itself is a symbol of American ideals and the cost it takes to preserve those ideals. And I think it's one of those monuments that people come regardless of their political affiliation or their attitude. I think they come there again in a sense of reverence. And these people lost their lives, and as you tomb guards all know, this is the ultimate sacrifice, and that's why it is. And again, I think it's amazing in America that we guard the grave of a common soldier. We don't guard the grave of presidents. We don't guard the graves of politicians. We grave the grave of the citizen soldier, which again, what George Washington said is that again, when we picked up the arms, we did not lay down the citizen. And I think that's again why it's so important, so significant, even to this day.
Well said, Philip. Thank you. I know that you're going to be with us as the Centennial gets closer there. You're going to be coming and joining us at Centennial Week, where you're going to get an opportunity once again to talk about your work and hopefully we'll bring in some public so they can ask some questions. And I have a feeling, much like myself, you might have a few tomb guards wanting a little scribble or two in their book, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Cool.
But until then, how does the public find out more about the work that you're doing, and all of the books that you've authored?
Sure. Well, you can go. If you're interested in this particular book. If you go to the website that supports the book, and again, there's a lot of documents and videos and other materials there. It's basically www.tomb2021.com. So it's basically the Centennial, and they can order directly from that. If they want an autographed copy, if they order from that website, if they email me or whatever, I'd be glad to send them an autographed copy of it. And then I have my personal website, which is www.philipbigler.com with one L for Philip. And that's basically the website I had from my National Teacher of the Year days. And again, a little bit about biography. And there's a bookstore. There's several of my books are available there that would be particularly of relevance to people. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time today. I know that it's a Sunday and we're both battling some cold winter weather, but at least we're indoors and we're doing this. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Well, thanks, Gavin. This is going to be a very special year, and I hope this COVID stuff stops because there's so many things planned for the Centennial, and this is a time for Americans to remember, and it's going to be a very, very special, important time for all of us as a nation. And it's time for us to renew our sense of being Americans.
All right. Well, thank you. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you in November.
You bet. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.